You're listening to Inside the Village, where all news is local and no topic is off limits.
So help me, Bob, it's bully in the alley. Hey, bully in the alley. So help me, Bob.
This is Inside the Village for the week of April 26th, 2023. I'm Scott Sexsmith with Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. It's great to have you back in the studio.
Good to see you. Yeah, nice to be back after having to do it remotely last week.
Well, you know what? It was a good test of our skill and our ability.
How did it look?
Okay, actually, it was a good test of Derek's skill and our ability.
Yeah,
because he's the mastermind.
I never watched the final product. Was it? Did we look okay?
You look great.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's a good thing he's organized.
Thank God.
Speaking of which, today is National Get Organized Day.
Today is?
Are you an organized type?
Well, you know me. I'm not that organized. I try to be organized. I think I'm organized, but I'm really not that organized.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I'm organized with some things.
Yes.
My golf bag, meticulously organized.
Yeah. You'd think you'd be a better golfer.
You would think that. First shot of the show, right there. Yeah, but otherwise, I'm not. Especially with big events. You know, I'm so lucky that my wife looks after 99.9% of the stuff. 100% of the stuff, I just kind of show up and it's done because I'm not organized.
What I find, and maybe it's the business I'm in, but you wake up in the morning, you think you've got your day organized for how it's going to work out, but then the news gets in the way and things change and priorities change. So by the end of the day, you look back and it's nothing like how you expected. So that's the level of organization I'm at.
All right, Derek, organized? Yeah.
Well, Derek's organized. Look at he's always on the ball.
He keeps us organized.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, he's great.
Every relationship needs one, and we have.
We just had a conversation before we started about something he's going to get done, and you thought it would get done tomorrow. He said, "No, I'm going to get it done in 5 more minutes."
See, I'm the procrastinator.
Yeah, that's
clearly
right.
Not Derek.
That's right.
All right, big show today. Ron MacLean from Hockey Central and Hockey Night in Canada will join us to talk playoffs. That's exciting.
That's very exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait to. It's been a year since we had Ron on, so it'll be nice to catch up. Before we get to that, though, the first word to Frisco, and let's talk about a pizza scam in York Region.
I say the same thing every week, but I love talking about the local journalism we're doing, and this is one of those examples of a quick hit. It's not in-depth journalism, but the police in York Region, where Newmarket is, are warning about this pizza delivery scam. I don't know if you read the story, but essentially it's yet another scam that's out there that people have to be on the lookout for. So I guess two guys show up, one with a pizza and one with cash. And they stop people and say, "Hey, I just ordered this pizza, but they will only take credit card, and I only have cash. So if I give you the cash that I have, will you give them your credit card?"
Oh,
so they agree. The guy pulls out a machine. Apparently, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
They swipe the card, right, and give back the guy a replica card that looks like his card, right? And they take the card because that machine actually records the PIN number of the guy's card.
Right. Yeah.
And before the guy realizes it, they've already gone out with his Visa and bought all kinds of things, got cash advances. I mean, I guess if you're into ripping people off, you could brainstorm forever about different ways to do it. But this is a new low for me. That was shocking.
Yeah. Have you ever had any kind of credit card theft or your wallet stolen? Anything?
No, my card's been hacked. I've had to call the credit card company and say, "Hey, these are not my charges." But I never had my wallet stolen.
Yeah, I had mine stolen years and years ago, and the credit card was used. And it's true what you say. You truly feel violated.
You do, but I don't know. I mean, the level. I mean. There's lots of, I don't know, I'm not going to
So much thought would have to go into planning.
This is what I mean, right? And it's like, okay, let's go rip this guy off. It's just a world I don't understand, I guess.
Clearly, they're very organized.
Right? This is organized crime.
Organized crime. Mm-hmm. The Georgetown Boys. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, this is a beautiful story written by Mansur Tenweir on Halton Hills Today. I love when our journalists kind of tell a story of something that happened a long time ago in their community. And this is one of those examples. The Georgetown Boys were a group of young Armenian refugees who survived the Armenian genocide. But it was actually some girls. It wasn't just boys and girls. It was girls as well. And they went to a place called Cedarville Farms, which is now a park.
Right.
And he goes back to tell the history of this park and what it once was and how these children lived on this farm. They learned to become farmers. And basically how they were handpicked out of a lottery from overseas. Their families had been killed, and they were brought over. And it was kind of like setting the tone for Canada's humanitarian tradition that would go on, that we'd welcome refugees from all parts of the world. And this was kind of one of those early examples of it. And it's just a beautiful story. Now it's just a park, right? A lot of people don't know the history of what happened here. And he really goes back, tells a beautiful story, and interviews some of the people who are, relatives of the original Georgetown boys. It's a beautiful story.
And speaking of beautiful stories, a young Barrie boy caring for a diabetic cat.
Yeah, this story has all the elements of a great piece of local journalism. It's a story everyone's been talking about. Demon the cat in Barrie. His 11-year-old owner, Taylor Green. The cat was diagnosed with diabetes, and this young boy is taking it on himself to care for the cat. So he's testing its blood sugar twice a day and giving the cat insulin if it's needed.
Wow.
And the local veterinarian is just shocked that this young boy can do this. A lot of adults have trouble doing this kind of testing and administering the insulin. So he's taking it on to care for the cat. It's a beautiful little story, and it's one that, like I said, it's one that people are definitely sharing.
Well, possibly a future veterinarian in Barrie. Good on Taylor Green for doing that. Okay, today's guest, he's a big deal. We're happy to have him back. Ron MacLean, the host of Hockey Central and Hockey Night in Canada, and obviously the face of hockey in this country.
It's a big episode, and I just think the last game that he was involved with was the big one. The Leafs came back down 4-1 against Tampa. So lots to talk about. It's exciting to have Ron come on.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where the Don Cherry thing sits now, and you and I talking just before we went on the air about sports betting and how that seems to be very prominent, certainly on the broadcast.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into all that.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, let's do it. Ron MacLean, when Inside the Village returns, right after this.
Reporters, editors, and journalists who go the extra mile to get the story and get it right. Go behind the scenes with those who cover the stories that matter most to you and your community. Look for it in the Village Features section of your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Welcome back to Inside the Village, alongside Village Media Editor-in-Chief Michael Friscolanti. We call him Frisco. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Springtime in Canada is certainly a great time if you're a sports fan. The NHL playoffs well underway. And who better to talk some puck today on ITV is the host of Hockey Central and Hockey Night in Canada, and of course the face of hockey certainly in this country, Ron MacLean. Ron, it's been a year. Great to catch up and see you again.
You remember where I was a year ago, Scott?
You know what? I do. You were, I don't know if it was a hospital room, but you were suffering from COVID.
That's right. I was quarantined in Campbell River, the home of Kyle Bukauskas, ironically, and I gave it to Kyle and Dana, his fiancée. Bad. That was the hardest part, and is the hardest part of COVID, is the responsibility you feel when you spread it. But I caught it doing Rogers Hometown Hockey in our last season out in BC, and so the last time I was on with you, I was stuck against a hotel room wall. And the funniest story of all, while I was there for 6 days, I ordered Chinese food. I thought with Skip the Dishes, I would order Chinese food. I had a fridge, a microwave. I'll order a whole bunch of Chinese food, and that'll last me for the week because I basically can't go anywhere. And I ran out of protein on the last day. I had lots of noodles and rice, but I had no chicken or anything. So there was a vending machine down the hall, and I thought, well, I can go down the hall. I won't get into any trouble there. And I went to the vending machine and I bought jerk teriyaki. It was teriyaki beef in a little plastic, bag. And I thought, well, I'll heat that up in the microwave. It'll just be like having some steak. It was brutal. And the odor from when I did that, poor hotel residents out in Campbell River, I forever apologize.
And I remember dealing with and I can't remember his name escapes me, the PR rep from Sportsnet at the time said, you've only got 15 minutes with Ron. And I remember when you came on, and I wanted to be respectful of your time, and I know we've only got 15 minutes, and you were like, are you kidding me? I haven't talked to anybody in hours. Right. I'm stuck in this room.
But that was, I jinxed it because, bless his heart, Guy Lafleur passed away that day or right after that. And I ended up doing every media source available to mankind. And I remember so many things about that particular, and the weather was crummy. I could go outside, right, as long as I didn't walk up to somebody and expose them to more trouble. But we had just 6 days of torrential rain on the island, and lots of fond memories. But here we are, and that's not what you wanted to talk about today.
No, let's talk some hockey, and I guess it's only right that we start in the center of the universe. Big win Monday night in Tampa with the Leafs coming back from a 4-1 deficit to take a 3-1 stranglehold. Is this team the real deal?
Yeah, absolutely. The acquisitions, there's so many thoughts, Scott and Michael, that I've had. One of them is, again, back to Rogers hometown hockey and the fact that I was in British Columbia a year ago. The two heroes, Morgan Riley and Alex Kerfoot, are childhood friends from West Vancouver. And our final stop was the following week in North Van.
Right.
And we featured a lot of the West Van storyline because they're side by each. Anyway, those two kids played for the Hollyburn Huskies in minor hockey all the way up. It's just incredible, that sense of community. I mean, you know what this podcast is essentially a representation of big stories, but at the speed of trust, which is the speed of a village. And I just look at this series. Marner and Stamkos, two of the superstars in the series, are from Markham. You have that connection to West Vancouver. Over on the Jet side, there's 5 players or principals with connections to Brandon, Manitoba. You think of the Stanley Cup. Last year, Nathan McKinnon joined Sidney Crosby from Little Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, with his name on the cup. That's what really has struck me about Toronto and how they did it, Scott and Michael, is if you look at who they brought in the last few years, like we have Derek Lalonde right now helping us out on our broadcasts. Derek's the head coach of Detroit, but he was John Cooper's right-hand man in these glory years in Tampa Bay. His first professional gig was Toledo, team called the Walleyes, and he had nobody. He came out of college hockey. He had been at Denver University, and this was his first pro gig. And his scouting ace was that he knew the college scene, so he went out and grabbed captains, whether they were Division I, Division II, Division III, it didn't matter. He loaded his team with captains from university in the United States, and they improved by 59 points that season with all those captains. And you think of how Toronto has slowly built. John Tavares, captain of the Islanders; Mark Giordano, captain of the Calgary Flames for all those years; Alex Kerfoot, captain at Harvard University; Ryan O'Reilly, captain of the St. Louis Blues. They've brought in all those leaders, and I think that's what's helped make them for real.
That's a great story. Thanks, Ron. Can you put us in the studio at that moment? I mean, all of us are watching that game at home. It's 4-1. It's the third period's ticking away. Did anyone believe that this could happen where you guys were sitting? No, they didn't. And it's funny because the previous evening, Kevin Bieksa came on after the first period of Edmonton and Los Angeles, and the Kings were leading 3-0 and absolutely annihilated the Oilers and chased Stuart Skinner, the starting goaltender. And Kevin came on in the intermission and said, he was working with David Amber that evening, so I'm watching. He said, look, what is Edmonton's strength? The power play. So what they've got to do is try and get some ozone time here in the second period. And he says, you got to know when you change ends, it's psychologically a break from that lousy past. Everything looks different. You're skating the other way. The change is different. So it kind of gives you a fresh start to begin with. If they can get some ozone time, maybe draw a penalty, their power play's lethal. Then if they score on the power play, they get one after that, they're right in the game. And that's exactly what happened. He called it. Whereas going into the third period of the Toronto show, he did not feel. He said, there's no chance. He said, I could wear him. And that night, he wore, the Edmonton night, he wore his jacket inside out later as kind of a rally cap, right? Yeah. So he said, I could take my pants, my underwear, I could turn everything inside out. There's no chance the Leafs are coming back, but they did. And we unfortunately, Derek Lalonde was watching like a hawk, but we were tied up also hosting the Winnipeg Jets game. So at the second intermission, we do a Toronto-Tampa intermission, but we also welcome viewers from Winnipeg. And then right as we go to break on the Toronto show, we begin to do a pregame show to the Jets Vegas while the third period of the Leafs is underway. So that's how zany it is down at, we call it One Mount Pleasant, the address of Rogers Studio. Yeah, I used to work at One Mount Pleasant when I was a senior writer at MacLean's for many years. And you guys, I forgot that you guys were down there. I listened to Sheldon Keefe talk after the game, and the thing that struck me, again, I'm not a professional hockey player. I wasn't even a pretend hockey player. But he talked about how they didn't want to lose that period. Even though they were losing 4-1, they want to go out because it's going to carry over to the next game. They don't want to let these guys blow them out 7-1, right? And you've been around, NHL hockey players your whole career. How do you keep that mindset? Because it would have been a lot easier for the Leafs to just say, you know what, we'll try to get him in the next game because this one's over.
I think it's the lesson of life, and that is how you park things, how you are resilient. All of hockey has always been sort of, I think, first and foremost, a little bit of a representation of soldiering, a microcosm of soldiering. Certainly when Pierre de Coubertin recreated the Olympics, brought the modern Olympics around in 1896, it was, believe it or not, because he felt his country, France, had been poor on the battlefield. And he respected English soldiers and the work that had happened at Rugby and Brown and Eton. And he thought if he brought sport into the mix in France, perhaps their military would benefit. So it's always been, plus the hunt. If you go way back in time, how hunting was such a survival method. So sport is a chance to practice that. You're always looking in life for ways to practice. I mean, journalism is an example of ethics. It's a study of ethics, and sport is a study, horribly, of war, which hopefully we are working our way towards eliminating that need, but chances are we never will. Anyway, I think that's a person put in the crosshairs, like when Alex Kerfoot signed with Toronto. He had actually come over from Colorado. He was drafted by New Jersey out of Harvard. But when he was coming to the big smoke, his father owns the Vancouver Whitecaps. His father's, really wealthy. He did extremely well in business. So he comes from, what we would call privilege. And they said, now, Alex, you're going to be thrown into the crosshairs of media scrutiny and the fan love affair with the Leafs. Will you be able to handle it? So he'd had a little bit of, experience with his dad running the Whitecaps and such, and being at Harvard. Those are the lessons. They're just basic life lessons on how do you go through the tough times, difficult times, and maintain your self-confidence and your belief. And all players, I'm watching Stuart Skinner, the young kid in net for the Edmonton Oilers. He's grinding right now. I remember I was in New Jersey, Michael. One time I was doing a playoff game at what was called the Brendan Byrne Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, Secaucus. And I was just sort of pacing like one does before going on stage to do a speech. And one of the workers at the rink came by and he says, "You're really grinding, aren't you?" And I thought, yeah, you're right. Why am I grinding like that? It's, this is the Stanley Cup playoffs. You have the biggest lesson I had to learn as a broadcaster was you're there to make people's day. Get out of yourself and into the fan or the viewer. Mm-hmm. And I think a hockey player, their out is to think of their teammates. The power of each of us is all of us. And when they get that in their head, Nylander did it the other night. Nylander was selfish with a terrible penalty early, and then he was very unselfish. If you look at it would be the winning goal, I think, where Nylander gets clipped. Yeah, it's a power play for Toronto in overtime. He gets clipped by a high stick, and his normal behavior would be to look at the referee and where's the call? Mm-hmm. But he got right back on the bit, went over to the left point and made a key pass to Giordano and then the tip by Kerfoot. Mm-hmm. So that's it. Be unselfish, and players practice that, are taught that endlessly.
Ron, one of the videos that surfaced certainly online following that big victory was that of GM Kyle Dubas, just giving it to the fans in Tampa Bay, and you didn't have to be a great lip reader to see what he was saying. What are your thoughts on that? Is it not a good look for Kyle, or is it just him sticking up for his guys?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, as a referee for 23 years, I worked for Hockey Canada as what's known as a level 5 referee. You kind of work up. Ultimately, if you're to do the Olympics or the World Juniors, you will get your level 6. I never got that, but level 5 entitled me to do high level university, junior, semi-pro, and I know, Scott, that at the end of the day, if the coach loses their marbles, the players begin to lose their marbles. There's a lot of people with a vested interest, fans, general managers, coaches, and players. The referee as arbiter can't have that, of course, has to be the neutral, ethical canary. But I do think it's really important for Sheldon and Kyle to learn to hold that back. John Cooper's done an amazing job. When Chernak got knocked out of the series, he was very calm. When Braden Point had a goal disallowed, extremely calm. That's the mark of a champion. Al Arbor was probably the best I ever saw at that. And even Scotty Bowman, I remember Mark Crawford losing his marbles in a Detroit-Colorado series. The ones who win are the ones who don't take the bait. You it's like life again. You try not to take the bait. You're in control unless you let someone else, so often we internalize our lives based on the what's on the outside of somebody else. can't do it. And if Kyle, is going to go on here, I would recommend he doesn't do that. But, who doesn't wear their heart on the sleeve from time to time?
For sure.
Do you still ref, Ron?
No, I play twice a week, Michael, during the winter. I'm done now for the season. Obviously, Stanley Cup is a busy 2 months. But, I miss it. It was again, I would use that as kind of a template to determine how is your communication skill. All my life, Frisco, I remember losing debates.
That's a keeper right there.
Yeah, thank you. I would. There's a song I just love. Where's your disco? San Francisco, where's your disco? And it's this. So I'm afraid it takes me to that song when I use your moniker. Anyway, when I refereed, I thought, am I Mark Twain? The mark of an intelligent person is their ability to communicate their idea, and I've never had that. I've always been wandering off. Concision's not a gift. My analogies seem to be non-mainstream. When I was in grade 11, I remember losing a debate, and I thought, there's not a chance I lost that debate. Surely to God, but I became unpopular either by being smug or whatever I was. I lost the debate in the court of public opinion, and that's refereeing to a T. Is are you winning the respect of the players? Can you manage? I tried to do it with honey. Some do it with vinegar. But I'd have 4 games in a row where my game management, my human condition management seemed to be off the charts succeeding. And then the 5th game, the guy would look at me and just say, oh, for bleep's sakes, just make the bleep and call. Quit talking so much, and I realized I wasn't connecting with that person. So it was great training for broadcasting.
Ron, the Rogers deal, and you and I spoke about it extensively last year, ends with the 2025-26 season. And at that time, your hope was let's get through this, and then we'll reevaluate career-wise. Anything change? Is that still the goal?
No. I have a year after this, Scott, on my contract, which would mean there'd be 2 years remaining on the Rogers deal that I don't have a contract for.
Okay.
My sort of thinking. Well, we'll have to. The company will make all these decisions, but in my world, if I'm, I do sometimes look at myself in promos and think, good grief, you're Waldorf and Sandler up there. It's not fair to the viewer to be dragging this on. But on the other side, I pray that, where would we be if we didn't kind of pay attention to Mozart and Shakespeare and the old ones? So that's always in my head is, when is the right time to step aside and let somebody else have the reins? And I would say in a year's time, if not sooner, and even in these playoffs, David Amber and I are sort of co-anchoring so that he has a full presence on the telecasts and a chance to, feel, his worth and value. That's very important to, have a succession plan for a company and even for us as colleagues. I don't mind playing on the 4th line. So that would be kind of the way I'd look at it. If in a year they were to come to me and say, okay, Ron, why don't you be Andy Rooney or Jack Whitaker or Alan Fotheringham, any of these folks who kind of just have a back page or a cameo role, but a presence so that I'm employed and feel like, again, valued and worthwhile and have a purpose, but not necessarily have to be the person that's considered the main anchor.
That's it. You feel like you'll come to that decision when the moment comes, right, Ron?
I think, or it'll be out of my hands. Like I never planned, Michael, I don't know how you are, but I never planned a thing, not a thing. Everything was like a call out of the blue to go to a radio station, a call out of the blue to apply for the Flames gig, a call out of the blue to go to Hockey Night in Canada. Never once did I send a resume anywhere. Mm-hmm. And never once did I apply to go to school. Nothing. It's just like one of these foolish right place, right time lives. And not to jinx it, but, I kind of, and it's not that I'm fatalistic, but I truly believe it's okay if someone else, I'm not clinging or attached. Let's put it that way. Someone else can make that call.
Whatever you do, Ron, we hope that you keep coming back to do the annual Gary Bettman interview. That's got to be one of my favorite. Yeah. My favorite. I mean, I admit I'm not a massive hockey fan. I've grown to love it more since my kids started playing hockey. I didn't play hockey growing up.
It's usually how it happens.
Yeah,
right?
and but you talked about journalism earlier. The Bettman interview is fantastic because there's a lot of prep work that goes into that. How much do you prepare for that?
Well, I used to prepare endlessly, and honestly, Michael, the problem is that the main issue, the one that I was so attached to having a good conversation with Gary about, was the salary cap. I firmly believe 2 things. I believe that a player, like Connor McDavid is making $11 million, and he's losing probably $1.5 million of that to escrow. I won't get into too many details, but he's he's making so little compared to his value, his market value. The top players in all the other sports make $50 million per season. It's ridiculous. It's extremely unfair. And I know no one wants to hear the players are underpaid, but nobody questions what Brad Pitt makes. It's just all about your marginal revenue product, which I would make simple terms is your market value, which is based simpler terms on can you put bums in the seats? And what is the next best offer for your services? That should determine what you get paid. If someone else is going to offer you double the money, you should be allowed to take it, but you're not in the NHL. And so then they have this collective bargaining foolishness, which is so unfair again. You have billionaire owners who could care less if they're out for 3 years because it's just one little portal in their big window of a windfall of money. And the poor player whose career is vanishing and has maybe 5 years to earn this money can't afford to take a year or two off to fight the fight. So the fight's gone. That's the moral of the story for now. Unless they find a way to resurrect the salary cap argument, I really don't have a huge quarrel with Gary Bettman, but I had a huge quarrel with him on that, and he won. So I prepared a lot, though, for that. And it's like the Calgary Arena just got publicly financed. Those would be kinds of questions for Gary Bettman that I would love. And I did my due diligence with the help of Rod Ford at first Washington State and then in Ann Arbor at Michigan. He was kind of my main deep throat, but I had several other sources that I would go to. I could show you a whole slew of books on the subject of labor relations. And it was a joy to have him as an expert, a lawyer, to talk to that. He'd get very offended by the audacity, but as you said, you enjoyed it as a journalist.
Ron, you talk about preparation, and I know for the weekly show, I believe you had said that prep would usually start on a Monday and kind of progress all week long. How do you do that now when you're on every second night? It must be just a crazy train to be on.
Well, the one thing that changes dramatically, it's kind of like going to the Olympics. I always tell young broadcasters, your big job is to be rested. You could prepare till you're blue in the face, but everything changes. Everything changes at the Olympics. A steroid scandal, a political scandal, a terrorist attack. Just be fresh so that you're, trust your instincts once that crisis arrives. And it's the same in the Stanley Cup. Even though it's 60 days, it's 9 weeks of sometimes every night. The game's the thing. The game becomes your entire focus on watching. It's people watch two ways now. Some watch with Twitter. I tend to be old school and watch, with my eyes. So it's kind of like scouting, analytics versus, the eye test. But you're definitely driven, Scott, by the game that night. And the biggest job we have, Matt Galloway, you both know, who works at CBC Radio, he has a little Post-it note on his microphone that says, "Stop talking." And and it's a good one, that I kind of, and again, I screw it up. I have for 40 years. But when I'm on my game, I know to shut up because the game is so important. And you've got experts, whether it's Derek Lalonde, Kevin Bieksa, Kelly Rudy, Jennifer Botterill. You've got experts who will just need the right question to trigger them to explore what just was seen by the viewer. And the viewer's so invested in the game that, my love of poetry and literature needs to take a back seat if I can remember a little bit more. Not to say that you don't still have a duty to change up the way you say it's a big game tonight. You do need to say it differently for 9 weeks, and that's kind of the challenge. But it's fun, it's like you preparing for an interview. That's the joy of our craft is research and learning.
What you bring to the table is the huge reason why a lot of people tune in, right? I mean, that's you're synonymous with that program and with Hockey in Canada, like Scott said. You're also, no one can think of Ron MacLean without thinking of Don Cherry, right? Ron, it's part of your history, part of your past. We all know what happened with Don a couple years ago. I need to ask you, do you still keep in touch with Don? Do you talk to him?
Yeah. We share season seats to the Leafs for one, so we take turns. There's 4 of us who own a seat. If the Leafs go the distance, a single seat for the second game. My wife Carrie went. I can't go, but Carrie went to the second game. It was over $500. I believe $564 for one seat, way up in the bowl. Like we're not in the platinums, not in the golds. We're halfway up the rink. So a single seat's over $500. If they go the distance, we will have to fork out the equivalent of 6 seasons worth of season seats. That's how expensive, which we can't do, of course. We'll need help. We'll be putting the lien on every person in Canada to come and buy a ticket to these games. Anyway, Don and I have that. On his birthday, we were in Sunrise, Florida for the All-Star, and we all phoned him from the bar at 1 a.m. I'm sure he really appreciated it. But Kevin Bieksa and Kathy Broderick, and we all, talked to him that way. And then I phoned him when Hazel McCallion died. The mayor of Mississauga was a dear friend of ours. Yeah. To see if he, was up to going. The problem for Don, right, is he can't go anywhere. It's a gong show. He becomes a sideshow, as he says. So, but yeah, we communicate, not a ton. It's, you can imagine, right? It would be almost like, I can't think of what it's like, but when you're in the game and he's not, that's extremely, it's disappointing to both of us. And I don't know that it would feel like rubbing it in, but somehow it would feel like rubbing it in that, we're touching a nerve there. So just on occasions like the anniversary of Rose's passing or Christmas or Don's birthday, I'll communicate with him.
Mm-hmm. Do you miss doing Coach's Corner, Ron? And what when we look back, what is the legacy of that segment?
Well, for sure, but I also think it's been unbelievable to have, we got into, Michael, such an interesting time. And you see this with, the day of the anchor is almost passing us by. Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon and so on. Yeah. It's just every day you see anchors fall by the board and panels take their place. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it represents, diversity, inclusivity. It allows for points of view that are different. There was always that, or there is always that fear nowadays when I learned the business, I told Scott this last year, when I learned the business, the key to the success or authenticity was to speak to a viewer who's like you. Mm-hmm. Your humor, your sensibilities, that was the only way you could be authentic. But in like our ratings for game 3 were over 3.5 million. 3.5 million people aren't going to be like Ron in terms of humor and ethics and so forth. So the danger of speaking to yourself is you're alienating so many people in the new world order where they can then jump on Twitter and say, that does not speak to me. Say something different. So it's a whole new craft that I've had to learn to try and not have people put up their hand and say, stop atting me with your opinion or with your bias or with your ethics. I just want to watch the hockey game. Mm-hmm. Really complicated because I know better than to ignore responsibility or duty as well. So you're in a really complicated world now, which has kind of invigorated me and made it kind of interesting to try and understand that challenge and do better at it. But yeah, so with Don, that I think we were just before George Floyd. We were before Bill Peters and Akeem Aliou. We were before a lot of the hot button topics of transformative topics of the day that were swirling around either Black Lives Matter or Idle No More or Me Too, #MeToo. These were all really at the forefront just after Don left. And I think would have been difficult for us to navigate, just the two of us. We're both, I liken us to 2 American Hockey League defensemen who were safe talking about the war in Iraq because we were considered 2 American Hockey League defensemen, but that isn't good enough anymore. If you're going to go down that path, you better be, impeccable. Don Lemon discovered that. The whole Fox News thing is just beyond the pale. That. It's just, that's the world we're in right now. And Grapes was good at reaching his viewer and knowing what they wanted. Expert at that, but we're held to a different metric or standard now, and I don't know if we could have made it much longer. So I'm glad Don went out. People aren't that mad at him for what he said. They should be. Don't ever get me wrong. You can't project an attitude on people just because of where they're from. We were so wrong, and it just needed an apology, and it would have been gone. We would have been onward and upward. But people aren't that angry about it. It wasn't the worst thing that's ever been said in the history of humanity. So he kind of went out on top, and people miss him, and I think that's kind of a nice way to be. I hope I'm speaking for Don there, but I think they still love him and hold him in high regard.
Ron, you mentioned the panel, and certainly the panel at Hockey Night has evolved over the last few years. Big personalities. It seems the chemistry is great with Kelly and Elliot and Jennifer, and certainly Kevin Bieksa brings a whole different dynamic. And you're kind of the ringmaster of the whole thing. Is that hard to do that? And the second part is, how much of that is scripted, or is it just fly by the seat of your pants and away you go?
It's both. We definitely jot down a point for each person to kind of have as their, again, preparation is your confidence. You need to have something. And when you have something, then you're free, liberated to go on and ad lib and to, you still get in trouble when you do that, or I do. But there's so little time. That's if I have a frustration, like Cabby wasn't doing the gambling bit when we did Coach's Corner. We had close to 7 minutes. Now we have 4 with 4 people, know, so you're really trying to execute with a time crunch, and bless their hearts, we have all of our panelists the ability to mentally edit on the fly. That command of language to get yourself out of a jam when suddenly the minute you thought you had is 15 seconds, that is extraordinarily difficult. Like I don't know if I told you, Scott, but when I was a young radio DJ, I would have to introduce music and the music bed before the vocals in the song.
Yep.
That was my time to speak.
Yep.
That could be 4 seconds. That could be 43 seconds. And I did that for a decade. So I learned kind of in my head what 30 seconds feels like. But most people don't have that training, and you need to be extremely articulate and have a powerful command of words to be able to get away with it. And we're lucky to have that group because they are really trying to do a lot with very little time.
Okay, now I have to ask you as a former radio guy and be honest and tell me if you still do this. When a song comes on, are you still doing an intro in the car?
For sure. Yeah, I hit the post. You know what that is, right? Or
Absolutely.
Hit the fade. There's different jargon in different parts of the country, but we would say hit the post means hit the start of the song. And that's a great, like my idol is a guy named Raccoon Carney at Seafund Vancouver.
Right.
He's now in marketing in Winnipeg. But Raccoon, I'll never forget him coming on one night and introducing Santa Esmeralda, Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, which is an animal song. But he introduced it, 47-second intro, and he was histrionic in his approach, and he nailed it. He gave a 47-second story, stem to stern, perfectly, with intensity that I'll never match, and just loved the guy. I would sit in front of my radio like I'm sure you would, Scott. I would sit at home. I'm a young man, teenager in Red Deer, Alberta, and I had a Panasonic stereo amp, and I would sit in front of it, looking at it, listening to I'm in Red Deer, Alberta, central Alberta, and the guy's in Vancouver, and I would sit listening to him, looking at that radio, like awestruck, and I'm not seeing him. I'm just listening to him. But that was my training. That was the magic of what that gig can do to make someone's day.
Absolutely. I was the same with Mike Cooper at 680 CFTR in Toronto.
It is a gift. I've learned that the hard way. I'm terrible at this with a microphone in front of me. I've made a career out of asking people questions and digging a little deeper, but doing it this way in this format is a whole other beast.
When they hold up the 1 minute to go, that's when it's, and then you think to yourself, well, tell us about Don Cherry, and if now, what am I going to do, right? If I tell you 40 seconds about Don, you think I hate the guy because it's not enough, right? So those are the dilemmas you feel when you're under.
Well, that's a great segue. Let's talk about gambling because you brought it up. It's come up a couple times. I mean, as a casual viewer, I've noticed that every other commercial seems to be about how I can bet on this hockey game, and it's part of the broadcast. How do you feel about that, Ron? What do you think about this shift?
Well, I lived the biggest complication is AI can get its hooks into you the way drinking and smoking couldn't. Mm-hmm. So when we started, smoking sponsored everything. Cigarettes were, on your leaf calendar. They were the one. Then drinking took over. We were living in a beer commercial for about 2 decades. So it's not like vices haven't been sort of at the propping us up for all those years. So I can't suddenly pick gambling as the one that I choose to be moralistic or self-righteous or sanctimonious about. But I'm concerned because of the AI. That's, as I say, that's the one that your phone can suddenly say, hey, here's your opportunity. Nobody tweets at me or comes at me with, you better have a drink. But they do come at you with offers to gamble once you've taken the leap. So I'm a little worried about us being a sports book for sure. As I said, that said, when I started in the business at CKRD in Red Deer, we would run religious programming Sunday mornings from 6 to noon. It was all the evangelists had their opportunity, and that was what paid for the radio station. Not the commercials, not the Red Deer Rustler hockey and that rights fee. What paid for our station and kept us all employed was religious programming. And the only difference between then and now is then we were trying to get you to heaven. Now, you know what we're trying to do. We're getting you to Sin City and on your way to hell. But so it's something to think about for sure. And, there's a tremendous backlash. A lot of people are concerned about it. Cab Brell Richards, who hosts our thing, is a gorgeous human being, so I would never say a bad word about Cabby and his segment for sure. But we're all looking. What sort of troubles you again is that it's taken content out of our broadcast that kind of is frustrating. Because poor Cabby, he's not allowed to say I favor the Leafs, so he's not really giving you the goods. He's having to manufacture a segment without actually tips. It's not like watching business TV, which I never watch, but it's on at the club when I go to work out, and there's all these experts telling you what to invest in and what the trends are doing, and it's all Greek to me, but just as the gambling is all Greek to me. But the kids seem to be relishing it too, so we'll have to watch.
All right, good stuff. Ron MacLean. Ron, thanks for doing this today, and great to catch up, and good luck the rest of the playoffs this year.
Pleasure, Scott, as always, and Michael, great to meet you, and we'll talk to you soon.
For the latest in in-depth features and enterprise journalism from your local writers at Village Media, be sure to check out The Big Read. The Big Read. It's the full story behind the headlines. Look for The Big Read on your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Back to wrap on Inside the Village with Michael Friscolanti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. What a great guest. I could sit and talk to Ron MacLean all day long.
Yeah, that was a great chat. You've watched him on TV your whole life. He is like the face of hockey in this country, the guy you're used to seeing on the screen. I think my dad will finally watch my show now that Ronnie's come on. That was great.
Yeah. He's so knowledgeable, and to be able to pull out the facts that he can at a moment's notice on a whim, and just make his point as eloquently as he does. It's remarkable, that skill set.
Well, that's the talent, right? The way he can pull out names from a hat, basically, right? He knows where everyone's from. He knows what junior team they played on. He knows who was his teammate or who came up the year behind him. But that's what sports is all about, right? Sports is about the stories. That's why we love the games, right? Because of the stories within them. I know that's why I'm a huge sports fan, and why I love reading the best sports writing there is. It's the same reason. It's because it's all about the characters, man. It's all about the characters, and I love the point that he made that nothing is bigger than the game. And I remember Gretzky always saying that too. Nothing, no person or no one thing is bigger than the game. A big game that is coming up, though, is Game 5 between the Leafs and Tampa. And, I don't want to jinx it because goodness knows, luck has not been on their side in the last several years. But wouldn't it be something if they beat Tampa and Boston beats Florida and Toronto and Boston now meet in the next round? Boston, what was it, Derek? 65 wins, 62 wins? 65 wins this year out of 82 games. That's crazy. They shouldn't be thinking that far ahead, though. They got to get through the step in front of them. But I'll say, as someone who loves the stories there in sports, I could go either way on this one, right? My heart's not in the Leafs. I'm not a big Leafs fan. I mean, good for them if they do it. But for me, both stories would be wild, right? That they finally break this curse, they get past the first round, and Leaf fans go crazy. But the other side of me is saying if they somehow blow this again, they lose the next 3 games, and they don't win this series. Could you imagine? It's just another wild, just another addition of the story. It's kind of like when the Red Sox just couldn't win the World Series, right? Just built and built and built, and every time they couldn't do it. So next week we'll be on the air. I guess we'll know the answer, right? It should be over by then, right? Absolutely. And 2 things we do know is their backs could be against the wall, and they will give 110%. No, there's nothing like sports cliches. I just love it. Well, this is how it was great about Ron. Not one sports cliche. Not a single one. Conversation. I think some of our questions may have had the cliches. Absolutely. But not his answers. All right, just before we go, I want to say a big shout out to Kathy in Aurelia, Frisco, who sent us a lovely email.
late last week. She's been a longtime viewer of the show, and we certainly thank her for that. And thanks for taking the time, Kathy, to reach out. And you can as well, itv@villagemedia.ca. If you want to catch up on back episodes of the show, we encourage you to do so. You can do just that at insidethevillage.ca, wherever you get your favorite podcast, and of course, across the Village Media Network. For executive producer, see, it's time to go. Executive producer Derek Turner, editor-in-chief with the Alarm Bells, Michael Friscolanti, I'm Scott Sexsmith. We'll talk to you next week.
You've been listening to Inside the Village.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe, provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.